What exactly is employee experience? How is it different from culture or employer brand? Why does it matter? And why is it a good idea for you to be focusing on it as an HR professional? What can you actually do to improve it? These are all questions that today's episode of HR Coffee Time is here to answer. I'm your host, Faye Wallace, a career and executive coach with a background in HR, and I'm thrilled and a bit shocked to have recently been ranked as the number 10 most influential HR practitioner in the UK by HR Magazine. Welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you here, and I am so happy to be able to introduce you to Chris Manning. Chris is incredibly passionate and knowledgeable about employee experience, and he generously gave up his time to share with us what employee experience really means, how you can measure it, and how you can find practical ways to improve it, whether you work in a small organization or a huge global business. I always think that one of the best things about working in HR is that there's always more you can learn, no matter how long you've been working in HR and no matter what job level you hold. You're never going to get bored. If you're a generalist, you can keep expanding your knowledge into areas of HR that you might not have worked on before, or you might discover a particular area that you really love and you decide you'd like to specialise in it. In the Essential HR Planner, which I update every year to help you set and achieve your career and work goals, there's a section in there that maps out the different specialist areas that fall within HR. It's there to help you spot areas you might want to learn more about, areas that you might want to get better at in your current role, or perhaps even specialise in one day. And they can be areas that you know will have a hugely positive impact on the organisation you work for if you start to focus on them. And I'm gradually working my way through that list with the podcast so that hopefully, eventually, there will be an episode to support you with every single one of the things that are on that list. So I'm really pleased that today's episode means employee experience is now part of that growing library of HR topics that we've explored together on the podcast. I hope you're going to enjoy meeting Chris and learning from him as much as I did. Let's go ahead and meet him now. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled we're having this conversation. You have been unbelievably patient with me. It's been nearly 9 months in the making, so it's fabulous to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I thought today I'd start us off by asking you if you could just introduce yourself. So do you want to tell everyone who you are and a little bit about what you do and why you're so passionate about employee experience?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Chris Manning. I'm currently the People and Culture Portfolio Transformation Lead, which is a very long job title, and I work at Primark. So my background, I actually started my career in facilities management, believe it or not, but it was in managed services. I then went over to recruitment outsourcing, which took me into the world of workforce management and HR. Later got picked up by Accenture in 2014, entered the world of HR consulting. And in 2019, I joined Infosys. And when working on a Unilever Global Employee Experience Program, I was trained up on design thinking. And it was that moment that something just clicked. And 2 years into that program, I found the thing I was most passionate about in HR, and it's employee experience. It is that golden thread that connects everything from breadth to depth. And I've been obsessing over it ever since. And I apply it and that way of working to my kind of global HR enterprise transformation today.
Oh, fantastic. I always love hearing it when people say that they're obsessed or obsessive about things. I think that's a really good sign for me and the listeners and the viewers that we are in for a treat with this conversation. So obviously, we're here to talk about employee experience. I always think it is helpful to start off conversations like this with a definition, because in the world of people and HR, I think we can be a little bit guilty of using a lot of jargon. So can you tell us all, what is employee experience?
Employee experience, it is everything beyond what an employee experience is. It's everything they feel emotionally. It's the conversations they have. It's the platforms they use. It's the policies that they're held to account to. It's the work environment they're in. It's everything work. And I often break it up into people, process, technology, data, governance. That's kind of, and it's essentially the kind of the operating model. I'm using more jargon.
That's fine. That's fine.
It's
Feel
the
free
danger.
to use more jargon.
Yeah. There are many facets to it, and I know that you've got some more questions in and around this, around culture and things like that, and employer branding. So we'll come to that later. But one of the most important things is a lot of people know about EVP, employee value propositions. So what is it that we're actually giving to our employees? Employee experience should be the lived EVP. If you're promising something to employees, that should be how they experience it. And that's probably the best way of anchoring that description. But it's open to so many views and opinions of what employee experience really is. It most certainly isn't an intranet tool, which is one thing that has come out the last 2 years. People talk about employee experience platforms, and actually they're just comms channels. That is not employee experience. That's a bit of a bugbear for me, you can probably tell. So yeah, employee experience is just everything that you actually interact with when you're at work.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much for explaining it to us. And you know what I'm going to ask you next, which is, how is it different to culture? Because a lot of what you're talking about there, I think, touches on culture as well.
Yeah. Culture is an interesting one for me because I find culture really intangible. I don't mean to upset any heads of culture at all, but culture is hugely important to any organization, of course. Culture for me is about behaviors, and culture and employee experience are intrinsically linked, because the behaviors that you have in an organization gives you the experience, gives you the employee experience. So the two are very intertwined, yet are fundamentally different. Culture for me is behaviors. Experience for me is why behaviors happen.
Fantastic. We've had how it's different to culture. How do you think it's different to employer brand?
So employer brand for me is your outward projection of your company to your external audience. That should be built off of your EVP, which is your internal. So as long as your employer brand properly reflects your EVP and your EVP becomes your lived experience, they're all in sync. Any of those break up, and that's where you get things like onboarding issues, early attrition, because people aren't experiencing what they were sold when they joined the organization.
Okay. As we've both said, there's a lot of jargon that's used within HR and people and that we're sharing today. And I think when you start using a lot of jargon or start talking about these things and giving them labels, I know from when I used to work in HR, and particularly when I worked in HR for smaller organizations, I would just feel like some of these labels didn't really apply to where I was working. I remember studying for my CRPD qualification, which was really useful, but a lot of the very useful stuff that I learned, sometimes it could feel like it was only really applicable to people who were working in massive organizations. And so I'd really love to ask you about this. So do you think that employee experience and really focusing on it is only relevant for huge organizations with tens of thousands of employees, where there may even be separate people who are looking after things like culture, employee value proposition, employer brand? Or do you think it's important for all organizations?
It's absolutely important for all organizations. If you're employing someone, they're having an experience, and you want to be able to influence that and maximize positivity from it, right? I guess that a lot of the jargon comes from probably many years of the likes of McKinsey and such, going into some of these big enterprise organizations and adding models in to try to understand complexity. Because as you know, the bigger an organization gets, the more complex it gets, and therefore you need to apply models, and models breeds jargon. So in your big global enterprise companies, there is a lot of jargon. There's a lot of complexity, and that applies to employee experience as well, in terms of the many layers and complexities you have within it. But like I said, employee experience is felt whether you're a team of 10 or a team of 100,000. And actually, I would argue that there's probably more importance for employee experience in the smaller companies. You're able to be way more nimble with it. You're able to understand it control it and influence it much easier. And you're able to set the standard. And as we know, culture is even more important in some of the smaller organizations. And because they are, intertwined siblings, so to speak, you should be thinking about both.
Yeah, don't worry, you've sold me on it. You've sold me on it, Chris. That's absolutely fine. But as you were talking, another thing that struck me is about measuring it. Again, with so many of the things we talk about for HR professionals, they can feel a bit, what's the word? Is it ethereal? A bit hard to pin down. And I know that you also talked about measurements of employee experience in a great article that you wrote for the Elevate Hub magazine that's produced by Claire Cathcart. So I'll make sure that I put a link to that magazine in the show notes and in the YouTube description below if anyone wants to dive into this in more detail and see what you wrote about it. But for anyone who is desperate to hear about it now seems like the perfect time to ask you about that. So how on earth do we go about measuring this stuff to see what the employee experience is like at the moment, how people are perceiving it, and so we can see if we're improving it as well once we start working on it?
Of course. I'll answer it twice. I'll answer it for the kind of small to medium company, and then I'll go to the kind of more complex enterprise, and you can hopefully see the parallels between each. So if you are working in a kind of small to medium business, it's a bit simpler to do in that you probably have less technology, less data warehouses, less processes and so on. And it's probably, like I said, a bit more nimble. Basic things like doing a survey, and that's beyond employee satisfaction. It's simple questions, bring it back to EVP being the lived experience. Were your first 90 days what you expected? If yes, why? If no, why? How does that compare to your brand perception of us before you joined? Again, it's that internal, external piece. What challenges and what friction do you get in your role today? Are these tools easy to use? Is it easy to do your performance reviews? What do you think about our manager capability? Are you getting the job satisfaction you want? Do you see a career path ahead of you? All of these things are our employee experience, whether it's everything across the employee lifecycle, essentially, that actually people see and feel and so on. But those are employee experiences. So you can break down the potential for those questions. For example, looking at a standard employee lifecycle from start to finish. So that could be from onboarding and joining through to your first development conversation, through to booking holiday or your first parental leave or your first sabbatical or even offboarding. And actually many people stop at offboarding because as soon as you've handed in your notice, you're out. Actually, that's the best time to understand the employee experience. Did we meet your need? Why are you leaving? Are you leaving for better careers, new opportunities? Are you moving because you're leaving? How can we get you to come back if you're a valued employee? And it's about creating feedback loops. And I've mostly just talked about kind of process. And I mentioned the kind of 5 pillars of people, process, technology, data, governance. Try and make sure you're covering those. So people, tell us about your teammates. Tell us about the culture. Tell us about your manager. Tell us about the leadership. Is it everything you would want to experience? Any feedback? Process, again, was it easy to book your sabbatical? Do you understand policies and governance? What are the controls in place around your role? Did it feel easy? Was there too much red tape? Did it feel risk-free? And then technology, was it easy to use the system? How is our HR system? Did you get the right prompts to do your reviews with your peers and with your employees? And then data. And that's more of a complex one. Because actually in your small to medium businesses, often there isn't much data captured because you may just have a simple HR system. But, do we have enough information on you to be able to serve you? And then that takes me through to the enterprise, almost the stark opposite of that. And that's probably where the big difference comes in. If you're working for these big global conglomerates, your average enterprise has 150 SaaS platforms, and SaaS is software as a service. So it's your likes of Workday, ServiceNow, Peakon, whatever it may be. That's your average enterprise. Each one of those has 350 potential data points from the employee. So you can do the math. Now, that's scary in and of itself because people think, oh my God, big brother. they're not all tracking you, and actually they're working in isolation to serve a very specific purpose. The opportunity that presents, however, is if you aggregate and layer all of those together, it can give you a very rich picture of people, process, technology, data, governance. And therefore you can, as a result of that, potentially personalize or hyper-personalize employee experiences. So instead of having a standard onboarding where everyone goes through the same journey, everyone goes through the same interview, everyone gets the same awesome hoodie and merch and water bottle, and everyone joins on day one, and everyone gets the same laptop, and everyone gets the same performance review and so on. They can understand actually what your preference is based on your demographic, your archetype, where you've come from, the roles you've done before, the skills you've got, the companies you've worked at before. And it can create a picture. And obviously with your intervention as an employee, you can start to get preferences. Actually, I want to work remotely. Actually, I want 360 feedback instead of just twice annual. Actually, I want these attributes from a manager. I want coaching and mentoring rather than just line management. Suddenly, that employee experience is fundamentally different to somewhere else you've been before. And this is what I'm particularly passionate about, is where you do have that data capability, or even if you don't actually, let's try and personalize employee experiences a bit more, because so many people leave organizations because of poor experiences with quite often line managers. Not giving line managers a bad rep, but often that's, I think it's 60 or 70% of people leave because of management.
It's a lot. There's a reason there's that saying, people don't leave companies, they leave managers.
Exactly that. And actually, often sometimes it is just a process piece of what everyone has to go through the same sausage machine of doing performance reviews in exactly the same way. Some people need regular feedback and want regular validation, and that's fine. That's especially generationally, it's vastly different. So actually just being able to say, actually, I would like a weekly conversation rather than twice annual can make all of the difference. And actually, I want some loose mentoring and coaching. You can set up an easy program. All of these things add up to employee experience and can make a difference between keeping your superstars and losing them.
It's so interesting hearing you talk about all of this. And I'm really grateful to you for sharing those two different examples so that anyone listening who's working in a smaller organization has got some really practical ideas they can move forward with. And anyone in a really large organization can really see the potential for tapping into the data that they have in such an exciting and potentially transformative way. I think hearing you talk is already giving me some ideas about how HR and people professionals can try and convince the rest of the senior leadership team, or convince whoever it is that they need to convince to get budget for this, that this is an important thing to focus on. So what would your advice be for anyone who thinks, right, Chris has got me really fired up about this. I really want to focus on employee experience within my organization. I'm going to have to get buy-in and budget for it though. What would your advice to them be about how they can go about getting that buy-in and that budget?
So actually you can combine both. And this is what takes you from just doing employee listening to actually creating an employee experience-led environment or an experience-led environment. So, and for me, it's through design. And design can be scary for people because you may not think you have the tools or the experience to redesign a whole new onboarding journey or whatever it may be. Actually, it's simpler than you think. You just need the framework or the tools at your disposal to be able to do it. And this is actually what I learned back in 2019 when I first started thinking about design thinking. And I'm imagining it in my head, so I'll just try and articulate it now. If you take onboarding, for example, so you can split onboarding into quite simple steps. So you kind of finish the talent acquisition journey or the recruitment journey, and then you get to offer. That's typically kind of when onboarding starts. And so you can have your pre-onboarding, your onboarding, and your post-onboarding. Post-onboarding being you're in the organization, you get your 90 days up to induction, and then you're stuck there. So if you break the onboarding journey into 3 stages, so it's really simple. Those are your rows across the top. You then need to break down, and I'm imagining a matrix here. So you then need to break down the dimensions, they're called, or the kind of the swim lanes or the layers underneath that. The best way you can do it is you have your employee journey first, and this is called journey mapping. At that pre-onboarding stage, what are the employee wants and needs? And this is a really important point, because most people, when they do things like journey mapping or process mapping or whatever it may be, they go, okay, what actions are done? That is not empathizing. And therefore, that is not listening to your employees. And that's the first rule of design thinking. And there are 5 steps to design thinking. It's empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. Anyway, getting back to the dimensions. So you have your employee wants and needs, and then you have their actions. I, as an employee, wanted this, so I did this. Underneath that, you have your front stage actors. So who is supporting them? So in that step, it could be the line manager, it could be the HRBP, it could be the recruiter. What are they doing, and what are their wants and needs to be able to support the employee? Then you have backstage actors. What's going on in the background? So you might have an HR director, you might have an HRBP, you might have an IT person doing the kit for them. What are their wants and needs, and what are their actions subsequently? Suddenly, you can see a complete value chain of who is supporting what at what step, and therefore what people are involved, what processes are involved, what technology is being used, what's the data being captured, and how do we govern it? Underneath that, you can then go, okay, well, what capabilities do we need to support that? And what are the opportunities? What are the pain points? What's the friction that we've got? And if you do that end to end, that's at a very basic level, you paint that picture, you can therefore understand, based on the listening that we've got, and you use your employees to give you this, right? Get some recent recruits in. Say, tell us about your experience across all of these different steps. What are the steps you went through? IT, what were the steps that you did to give them their laptop? And recruiter, what were the steps you did to hand off to the line manager throughout this? Suddenly, before you know it, you've had a really fun workshop. You've engaged all your people, and you have an operating model visualized in front of you. And the operating model is a fancy term for how stuff works, top to bottom, left to right. You've then got a visual of your as is. What happens today? Take that and then go, okay, well, based on those friction points, the pain points and the opportunities, how can we improve it? What do we need to change? What's our aspiration? Let's design our perfect journey. And the gap between that perfect journey, that is ideally not too blue sky, we send people to the moon for fun. So you need to anchor it, you need to temper it, keep it real, keep it desirable, keep it feasible, keep it viable. The gap in between that, that's the transformation you need to make. And that is how you actually operationalize and maintain employee experience. Otherwise, it's just listening. And that's how you do it iteratively. You listen to employees, you action it, you share that, you empathize. You've got input from people from all across the organization, all roles, all personas. And if you do that regularly, and I recommend you do it at least once a year, you will see a massive, massive improvement in retention, engagement, performance, happiness, well-being, you name it. Yes, it will take some investment, but you'll see the return.
Chris, you said that you were trying to articulate something that you were visualizing in your mind. You did such a brilliant job. I could absolutely picture what it was you were describing. What I think I'll do now is create some sort of written or visual resource for anyone listening or watching that they can download that goes with the episode so that they can see it in front of them.
I do actually have an example I can give you if you want to save you creating one. I will share it with you, and actually what I'll do is I'll amend a version that explains exactly the example I gave of onboarding.
Oh, that is so kind of you. Thank you. And if you want to find it, if you want to download the resource that Chris is going to very kindly share with us, just go to brightskyhr.co.uk/resources. Also, Chris, you've made me think in my Essential HR Planner that I've been creating for, nearly 7 years. I can't believe it. There is an employee journey in there in a visual format. And I've always had onboarding on there and I've always had offboarding. But I love what you're talking about thinking about what happens when the person has got past their first 90 days. You have a great term for it that I have just forgotten. Can you remind us what the term was?
Yeah, post-onboarding.
That's it, post-onboarding. a nice simple one. I've never had that on there. I'm going to be putting that in. So thank you for recommending it. And it would be great to know for people listening or watching, is that something that you're already doing? Is this something that's just totally passed me by? Or is it something that you're excited to give a try? You can let me know by contacting me on LinkedIn, or if you're watching the video, you can let me know in the comments. I'd be so interested to see that. But anyway, I better bring us back to the main focus of the interview. And oh gosh, we're running out of time. I'm going to have to release you back to your very busy day job in a minute. So before I say goodbye, I've got two more questions I want to ask. The first one is design thinking. So you mentioned right at the beginning that you've done some training in design thinking, and then you've just given us a great insight into what design thinking looks like in practice. Would you be happy to share where you did the training and if it's something that you would recommend? I'm now really keen to learn more about it. So yeah, hopefully people listening and watching would be interested too.
Yeah, of course. It honestly changed. I'd argue to say it changed my life, which is, it always sounds extreme, but I'm quite a strategic thinker. I don't know if you've heard of systems thinking before. Nabel Crowhurst talks about it a lot too. I am very much a systems thinker, and it can be a bit of a blessing and a curse, but design thinking really helps with that. So when I was at Infosys Consulting in 2019, they actually put everyone through design thinking as part of their onboarding journey. That is a standard for all of their consultants. And it just really helps with understanding how to do transformation. And I am ultimately an HR transformation professional. And I think it was actually born out of Stanford in the 80s. But you can do design thinking training on Open Uni. You can do it. I think there's some training on LinkedIn Learning if anyone's got access to that. There's lots of resources available. And you can, even just understanding it at a higher level through some research will honestly give you a huge amount of benefit. The important thing is you apply it to employee experience. And it's, like I said, it's more than just the listening side. It's what do we now do with that listening? Through employee listening, you've hit check one, which is empathize. Define is then, what does that mean for the organization? What's our problem statement? It's about defining the problem statement. Then you ideate. So, okay, an ideate is a very fancy word for what are our ideas? And ideally what you do is you get people together. And I say people, hopefully I don't go off on too much of a tangent here, but lots of transformation and change in organizations is delivered top down. It's execs or leaders sponsoring a project to say, we need to go and do this. That's great because that's where the budget comes from, where the business case is signed off. But the people that they're designing it for mustn't be forgotten. So yes, it's top down, but it must also be bottom up. And this is why I say when we get people in a workshop, they must come from all walks of life. It's really important to consider your personas, and personas is another bit of jargon that basically says, are we representing all of the people in our organization at all levels, from all countries, from all departments, all ages, all backgrounds, and so on. So to make sure that you're actually designing for everyone rather than no one. So that's really important. And then you get to the prototype. And again, prototype's another jargon word. It basically just means playing around with ideas. So once you've got those ideas, can we do a small pilot? So, okay, let's look at personalized merchandise for people. So instead of HR coffee time, what does Jane want? How can we personalize that for Jane? What time does she have her coffee? HR coffee time, 10 o'clock. And it's a bit of fun play of when does Jane have her coffee? And you personalize it to each person. It's a bit of a conversation. Oh, I'm a 3 o'clocker. Or actually, I have mine at 10 o'clock at night and I still sleep. Simple little things like that can make all the difference. Then you scale it and you go, okay, let's apply it to all of our merch now because we have a water bottle and a chair and whatever it may be. And then you test it. So you go, okay, great. Let's do that pilot over 3 months over our next cohort of 50 joiners. Let's get feedback and compare it to the time that we didn't have it. Does it work? Does it create a fun environment? Does it give the objective that we were looking to achieve? That is design thinking manifested. So yeah, go read about it, see if you can apply it. You'll be surprised how eye-opening it can be to your way of thinking.
As you were just talking, Chris, there was one thing actually that leapt out. Well, there were many things that leapt out, but you mentioned about it not just being a top-down approach, even though it's important to involve people at the top because, well, for all sorts of reasons. But one of the things you mentioned was budget. And that made me think, oh, hang on a minute. I'm not sure I've pinned you down quite enough on the answer to the question about how do you get buy-in and budget for this. I think we can absolutely see how you can get buy-in for the fact that it's such a collaborative process. Hopefully, as people are going through it, they're going to realize, oh, this is going to be beneficial, and they're going to be excited about it as well. But when it comes to actually getting that budget, are there any other practical tips you can give for how you can convince people that you should even be running the workshops or bringing people into a room? Because, of course, that is expensive for an organization, for people to give up their time and all be brought together.
So there are two fundamental parts of any business case. One is qualitative data and the other is quantitative data. Qualitative is kind of more of the softer experiential, how is it going to feel? How's it going to look? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be a better user experience? The quantitative is, okay, what does that mean from a numeric number, for example? And actually the two work quite well with the small to medium business to enterprise in terms of a scale. So if you're small to medium business, you're probably going to lean more on the qualitative because you may not have access to a lot of the data and the big platforms to give you the quantitative numbers. However, what you can do is you can make some assumptions in there. We had 50 joiners last year. We're going to go up to 75 joiners this year. We got lots of feedback here that would actually say that we lost 11% of our people because of X reason. If we scale that, we're going to lose more people. So therefore, you can kind of do the maths in there. But again, it's not scientific. It's kind of finger in the air. But again, there's some quant in there. The qualitative is probably more important actually in a small to medium business because you have less of the quant. So it's kind of more of it's people experience more. There's a stronger culture potentially in the smaller organization, and people have more intimate kind of relationships between each other because everyone works closer together. And so that qualitative piece is really important because it's seen and felt more. On the flip side, on the enterprise side, quantitative is almost always more important because you have access to data. So for example, in typical business cases you would want to understand your average handling time, for example, and it's kind of more service focused. So, okay, what was the time to hire exactly? How many days? What was the time to vetting? What was the time to onboarding? What was the time to interview? And actually, if we redesign that onboarding journey or that recruitment journey, what are the savings we're going to get from that time? And therefore, typically, what is the headcount we can reduce or that cost that we can reduce? Or what's the efficiency that we can gain in bringing that person on earlier to be able to deliver the work that they're meant to be doing? It's far more complex and there's big spreadsheets often and a lot of process mining and all of these types of things. It becomes much, much harder, but because the investment is often greater. But if you can apply as much science to it, if you're an small to medium business as you can, as well as the qualitative, and telling stories and getting quotes from people and saying what a difference this will mean and kind of making some assumptions in there in terms of your new target talent cohort and so on, it will make a huge, huge difference.
What an incredibly helpful answer. I am so pleased that I asked you that extra question about it. Thank you so much for sharing those insights with us all. And before I say goodbye and a huge thank you to you, I'm going to ask you the question that I try to ask every guest who comes on the show, which is, do you have a book recommendation or a different resource that you would like to recommend to share with everyone?
Oh gosh. So I'm an experiential learner, which means that I learn by doing. I am the worst book reader ever. I think I've been sat reading my book for the last 6 months and I'm probably about a third of the way through. The curse of having a 2-year-old and being tired at 8 o'clock every night. So no, I'm not going to recommend a book. Podcasts is probably what inspires me most. And that's probably the closest to experiential I can get. I am a massive Stephen Bartlett Diary of a CEO fan. I think he's just ahead of you, about to hit #1 podcast in the UK, but you're going to be challenging him soon.
We'll see. I'm not sure.
Hopefully you'll be overtaking him. I've got your back there. So yeah, I would just implore everyone to listen to many episodes there. There's lots about AI, which is also really exciting, but a lot of great leadership lessons. And actually a lot of the most successful CEOs and it's usually the CEOs specifically that get this, there's a lot of vulnerability in their background. They've gone through often trauma of some sorts, and the stories of resilience that they get out of the back of it are hugely inspiring. And just through them telling their stories, there's so much value that I get out of it as an HR professional in terms of things like influencing stakeholders and colleagues and getting ideas for things and just looking at things in a slightly different light and bringing yourself out of your own shoes and your own perspectives for a moment, again, to empathize. I probably listen to the hour and a half podcast and my notes on my phone is full of ideas that I then try and implement. So that would be my recommendation. Sorry, I don't have a book to recommend.
I know lots of people aren't big readers, Chris, so please don't worry at all about it not being a book recommendation. I had a guest mention quite a long time ago now that they weren't really a big reader, so they didn't have anything to share. So that's why I've changed the question to, have you got a book recommendation or another resource? And it's equally brilliant to have book recommendations or other resources. So thank you. But as well as looking up that recommendation, I know that people listening or watching might want to look you up or get in touch to learn more about your work or ask you a question. If that's the case, are you happy to hear from people, and what's the best way of them getting in touch with you?
Of course, if you get in touch with me via my LinkedIn, add me if we're not already connected, or drop me a message. I'm an avid networker. I'm always open to hearing lots of people's stories, so it'd be great to grab a coffee with anyone.
Brilliant. And again, I'll put the link to that in the show notes and the YouTube description. So all that leaves me to say is a huge thank you for your time today, Chris. I really enjoyed our conversation. I have learnt so much from you and I really appreciate it. And I know that so many people listening and watching will appreciate you giving up your time to share all of your knowledge with us too.
Of course, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're really welcome.